There is a man on the road north of Whiterun, standing beside a broken wagon in the cold. He is dressed as a jester. Bells on his hat, a dagger at his hip. Behind him, strapped to the back of the cart with ropes gone frayed from long use, sits a massive stone coffin. He is talking to it, not in the desperate, pleading way of someone who has just lost someone, in the practiced, gentle way of someone who does this every day, someone who has been doing it for years, someone who no longer expects an answer and goes on talking anyway. His name is Cicero. He is the last member of the Dark Brotherhood in all of Cyrodiil. He has been alone for a very long time. Take a slow breath. There is no hurry. We have the whole night. There is something sitting at the center of this story that I want to hold for a while before we reach it. A detail confirmed by the Brotherhood's oldest records, written into the moment the silence finally breaks. When we get there, it changes what everything before it meant. Hold on to it as we go. This is the story of what it costs to keep faith with something that won't answer you, and what it means when the silence finally breaks. Not for you, for someone else. Before we understand Cicero, we need to understand what he is carrying. The stone coffin on the back of that wagon is not a prop, not a relic, not the eccentricity of a madman who has confused devotion with obsession, though it looks exactly like that from the road. Inside the coffin is the mummified body of a woman who has been dead for centuries, a woman the Dark Brotherhood calls the Night Mother, the unholy matron, the shrouded lady, the bride of Sithis. According to the oldest written account the Brotherhood possesses, a document called the Night Mother's Truth, a history that has passed through many dark hands. She was once a living woman, a Dunmer. She lived in a small village on the banks of the Larsius River in what would later become the city of Bravil. She claimed to hear the voice of Sithis himself, the Dread Father, the embodiment of the void, the god of nothingness that the Brotherhood worships above all other powers. And Sithis, she said, was displeased. The void was hungry. Souls were owed. And so she killed her 5 children, one by one, sending them to the void as tribute. Her neighbors lynched her for it. They burned her house. They thought that was the end of her. It was not. 30 years later, a man heard a voice inside his own head, a voice that named itself the Night Mother, and charged him with founding a new guild of assassins, dedicated not to any Daedric prince, but to Sithis alone. The Dark Brotherhood was born from that voice. Its structure was built entirely around it. A listener, one person chosen by the Night Mother, the only one who could hear her speak, sat at the head of everything. The listener received contracts, passed them to speakers, who passed them down to assassins waiting in the dark. There is a detail about what happens when that chain breaks, what the Brotherhood becomes when the Night Mother stops speaking, that the journals circle around without ever quite naming directly. Without a listener, the prayers of the desperate and the grieving went unanswered. The Black Sacrament, the ritual performed by someone who wanted a death arranged, who had nowhere else to turn, went nowhere. There was one more thing that made the whole arrangement fragile in a specific and irreversible way. The Night Mother could only speak through her corpse. Her physical remains, the mummified body of that ancient Dunmer woman, were the conduit, the only conduit. Without them, she had no voice in the mortal world at all. The coffin on the back of that wagon was not just a relic. It was the only line between the Brotherhood and its god. And Cicero was the one person on all of Tamriel still carrying it. He was not always a jester. The journals he left, scattered across the floor of his room in the Falkreath Sanctuary, are some of the most quietly devastating documents in all of Skyrim. The first volumes are the writing of a completely different person. Clear sentences, dry humor, the careful record-keeping of someone who finds genuine satisfaction in precise, difficult work. He had come to the Cheydinhal sanctuary after the Bruma chapter fell, yet another casualty in the slow collapse of the Brotherhood across Cyrodiil. And he describes the reception warmly. He was welcomed. He was made to feel like family. The Cheydinhal sanctuary had known its own grief. The ghosts of an earlier purge still haunted its halls. But it was alive and operating, and Cicero was glad to be part of it. This is the man before the mask, an imperial assassin in the full swing of his working years, proud of his skills, devoted to the family that gave him purpose. His journal entries from this period read, with the satisfaction of someone who has found the thing he was meant for, a baroness killed with precision. The grand champion of the imperial arena approached as a star-struck fan, escorted through the great forest, and cut down at exactly the right moment. These are not the entries of a man troubled by what he does. They are the entries of a craftsman reviewing his work. But underneath the competence, something else is visible in those early pages. A way of paying attention to the people he kills that goes slightly beyond professional interest. The way someone notes the final words of the condemned, not with cruelty, but with the careful observation of someone who is keeping a kind of score. In the autumn of 4E 188, word came from Breville that the situation was growing dire. 2 skooma trafficking organizations had gone to war in the streets of the city. The lucky old lady, the statue so beloved it had given Breville its nickname for generations, was destroyed in the fighting. Beneath that statue, hidden for as long as anyone alive could remember, was the crypt of the Night Mother. The listener herself, a Breton woman named Alessane Dupré, the last living person the Night Mother had chosen to speak to, left her private residence and went to guard it. Cicero writes of her with unmistakable reverence. Not worship. The careful, particular respect of someone who understands what the person in front of them represents. Without her, there was no listener. Without the listener, there was no Dark Brotherhood in any meaningful sense. Just a group of skilled killers waiting in rooms, hoping the Night Mother would speak to one of them before they forgot what they were waiting for. Rasha sent 2 members to help defend the crypt, Garnag and a woman named Andronica. Cicero begged to go with them. Rasha refused. His place was here, defending the sanctuary. And Cicero accepted the decision, because he was a good brother, and good brothers accepted such things. He never got to say goodbye to Alessane Dupré. 3 weeks later, he would understand why that was the last time he could have. 3 weeks passed with no communication from the city. Then Garnag returned alone, gravely wounded, missing an eye, hauling the great stone coffin of the Night Mother behind him on the road through Cyrodiil. The story he told, as Cicero records it, could curl the blood of even the most hardened servant of Sithis. The crypt raided, Sister Andronica cut to pieces, and the listener herself, the most honored Alessane Dupré, burned alive in a storm of mage fire while she stood her ground in front of a coffin containing the bones of a god's wife. She did not survive. The Night Mother did. Cicero does not dwell. He records it with the stillness of someone who already knew the worst was coming and is now simply noting that it arrived. He calls her the most honored Alessane Dupré, that one precise phrase in the middle of a plain sentence, and moves on. It is the saddest kind of grief, the kind that doesn't know how to describe itself, and so doesn't try. The coffin arrived at Cheydinhal on the 21st of sun's dusk, and with it arrived a problem the Brotherhood had no mechanism to solve. There was no listener. There had never been a Brotherhood without one. the Night Mother chose her listener, and until she spoke, no one could be appointed. She was not speaking. The Black Sacrament went unanswered. Contracts went untaken. The people who had pressed fingers to bone and needle and knelt over ash and candles in their darkest moments, those prayers went nowhere. Cicero writes that they took to the streets to find contracts by ear, word of mouth, asking who was desperate, who was grieving, who wanted someone dead. He writes it without judgment, but with a quality of embarrassment. This was not how the Brotherhood worked. This was not who they were. But until the Night Mother chose to speak again, this was all they had. That silence would last for years. 2 months after the coffin arrived, the leader of the Cheydinhal sanctuary, a Khajiit named Rasha, a member of the Black Hand, announced that the Night Mother had spoken to him, that he was the new listener. Cicero did not believe it. There was a mechanism for exactly this situation, a set of phrases called the binding words, preserved in the keeping tomes and known to the keeper of the Night Mother's body. When the Night Mother genuinely chose a listener, she gave them a phrase from those words. The keeper confirmed it. The system existed specifically to prevent false claims. Because the Night Mother would never tell an impostor the right words, Rasha could not produce them. Cicero records what followed with a particular cold clarity. He couldn't challenge a member of the Black Hand openly without risking everything that remained. So he did something more careful. He found Garnag. He placed the evidence gently in a loyal brother's ear. He let the conclusion arrive on its own. He didn't wield the knife. He writes, he dipped the honey softly. Garnag did the deed, gladly. It is one of the most quietly chilling lines in the journals, and it arrives alongside the announcement that should have felt like a gift. The Black Hand named Cicero the Night Mother's keeper. He accepted with genuine honor and genuine grief, because the keeper did not kill. The keeper tended. The keeper washed the body with sacred oils, kept the candles lit, recited the ancient incantations, and protected the Night Mother's remains from the corruption of the living world. The Brotherhood's oldest tradition had been preserved. The cost was that the man who preserved it could no longer do the one thing that had made him feel like himself. Rasha granted him one last contract before the new role began. The target was an unnamed jester. Cicero completes it in a single journal entry. The jester lies dead. The final contract is done. And then, several months later, in one of those longer summer entries, he writes something that doesn't read like guilt and doesn't read like grief, and is harder to name than either. He says he thinks back fondly on his time with the jester. The laughter, the screams, the pitiful cries. And then, as the end came near, the laughter once more. The man was merry in death as well as life. Cicero writes that he was honored to know him. There is no irony in it, no performance, just a man who had spent his life killing people, encountering for the first time a target who seemed to understand something he did not, who laughed right up until the end, and then laughed again when the end actually came, as if it were just one more thing to find funny in a world that had given him plenty of material. That laughter would follow Cicero into the dark. The remaining members of the Cheydinhal sanctuary began to disappear. Not dramatically, not in raids or battles or purifications. In the quiet, grinding way of an institution that has lost its reason for existing. Pontius was killed by a common bandit on the streets of Cheydinhal. Not an assassin, not a rival. A Dark Brotherhood member, cut down while running an errand, and no one came to avenge him because there was no one with authority left to issue the order. Garnag disappeared, deserted or dead. There was no way to know. Others drifted away. In search of contracts, in search of food, in search of anything that wasn't the inside of a failing sanctuary in a city that was slowly forgetting the Brotherhood had ever been there. And then there was only Cicero. The journals from this period grow shorter, not because less was happening, more was happening to him than ever before. But the entries compress under pressure. A man with no one to talk to eventually runs out of the kind of things worth writing down. He talked to the Night Mother. Every day, the journals suggest, he talked to her. He described the silence. He asked her why she wouldn't choose someone, why she wouldn't choose him. He reported on the state of the sanctuary as if filing a contract summary. The dust, the cold, the candles that had gone out and been replaced with smaller ones, because that was what was available. He told her about the jester, about the laughter, about how much he missed having a blade in his hand. She said nothing. There is a detail from this period that sits at the edge of the journals and does not announce itself. The record surrounding the day of Rasha's death contains this line: "As commanded by the silence, so did I obey." He believed the Night Mother's silence was itself instruction, that her refusal to confirm Rasha was as much a communication as any spoken word. He had been listening to her silence so carefully for so long that he had started to read it. This is not a man who stopped believing. This is a man who found a way to believe harder than the silence allowed. And then, one day, alone in the sanctuary, he began to hear laughter. He writes of it in the 4th volume of his journals. He calls it a voice from the void, sent to cheer poor Cicero. He thanks the Night Mother for it. The dead jester's laughter, the echo of the last man Cicero had killed, had become his companion in the dark. Madness. Yes, but also the only thing keeping him going. He began to wear the bells. He began to speak in the third person. He began to call himself the Fool of Hearts. The jester's persona settled over him like a second skin, or maybe like armor, something warm enough to survive in, when the cold of an empty sanctuary and the silence of a god who wouldn't speak would have otherwise taken the last of him. The journals from this period don't read like madness performed for an audience. They read like something more specific and harder to witness. A man constructing a self he could inhabit when the original had worn through. That understanding is the saddest thing in those pages, madness that knows what it is. By the autumn of 4E200, the sanctuary itself was failing. People were pounding on the door, Cicero writes. Who they were, he doesn't specify. The entries have taken on a rhyming sing-song quality, as though the only way to get words from his head to the page is to set them to a rhythm that doesn't require coherent thought to follow. He misses his blade. He is still, in his way, trying. Here is the thing that surprises. The letter he writes to Astrid is not the letter of a broken man. He had found in the sanctuary's archives the passphrase for the black door of the ancient Dawn Star Sanctuary, sealed, abandoned, but preserved. A place that predated the current mess, a place where things had been done properly. What is life's greatest illusion? Innocence, my brother. He writes of this discovery with something close to delight. He has plans. He has the Night Mother. He has the passphrase to a fortress no one else knows about. He has not given up. He just needs one more thing, a listener. Someone the Night Mother will actually speak to. He sails across the sea to Skyrim, sick with the rocking of the waves, reading about the good days, the old days. He settles briefly in the Dawn Star Sanctuary. Cool and dark and lovely, he calls it, and gives his love to the Night Mother, and waits for her to speak. She doesn't. The silence of the void reaches across time and space. Its silence is deafening once more. He leaves for Falkreath. He leaves for the last chance he has. The wagon breaks down north of Whiterun. The wheel cracks. The coffin lurches. The road is empty except for a nearby farm and a farmer named Laureus, who has already refused Cicero 5 times and will not entertain a 6th conversation. Cicero stands in the cold beside the coffin and waits for a stranger who might be willing to help, calling out to travelers in the 3rd person, describing his poor mother who is unmoving and at rest, but too still, unable to explain what is actually in the box, because the explanation is stranger than the mystery. To anyone passing, he is simply a mad jester with a broken axle and a concerning amount of cargo. He is, in fact, the last guardian of a tradition that has kept the Brotherhood's god present in the mortal world for centuries, stranded on a road in Skyrim because a wheel cracked. The farmer calls him crazy. The guards eye the coffin. Either someone helps fix the wheel or someone doesn't. And either way, the wagon eventually gets moving, and Cicero gets back to what he was doing, talking to the stone box, maintaining the only relationship he has left. He doesn't know how close he is, how the same broken wheel on the same cold road is keeping him within reach of the place where the silence will finally end. How the Falkreath Sanctuary, just days down the road, contains the person the Night Mother has been waiting for all along. He has never been closer to the end of his waiting. He has no idea. The Falkreath Sanctuary did not welcome Cicero the way the Cheydinhal family had once welcomed him. Astrid's Brotherhood was, by 4 E201, something the older traditions would barely have recognized. The 5 tenets were gone. The Black Sacrament went unanswered. Contracts came in by word of mouth, rumor, hearsay. Astrid ran the family like a business, with her own authority firmly at the center. She was effective. She kept people alive and employed. She had simply decided that the Night Mother's authority was something she could manage around. For Cicero, this was a particular kind of grief. Not the dramatic, confrontational kind, but the quiet devastation of watching something you love slowly become something it was never supposed to be. He understood that arguing wouldn't change it. He understood that no one in that sanctuary was going to accept correction from a laughing jester about the old ways. So he did what he had always done. He tended the Night Mother. He kept the candles lit. He washed the body with the required oils, recited the incantations from memory, locked the chamber door, and talked to her every day without fail, asking her to speak, asking her why he was not enough, telling her he was still there, he would always be there. He had been reciting the binding words from memory every day for 15 years, a phrase preserved in the keeping tomes, the signal that a true listener would carry, the confirmation the Night Mother would give only to the one she had genuinely chosen. He had memorized them the day he was appointed keeper, and carried them every day after, waiting for the moment they would have somewhere to land. He did not know how close that moment was. The other members thought he was dangerous, possibly conspiring. Astrid heard him speaking to someone behind the locked door and concluded that a traitor was meeting with Cicero in the Night Mother's chamber. She couldn't have known the truth, that the only conversation happening in that room was one-sided, and had been one-sided for years, and Cicero was the only one in the building still trying to change that. She sent someone to spy on him. The only viable hiding place in a room containing a stone coffin and very little else was the coffin itself. Someone climbed in. Someone pulled the lid. And in the dark, alone, waiting, the Night Mother had company for the first time in years. Cicero entered the chamber, alone. As always, he began talking to the Night Mother the way he always did, asking her to speak, asking anyone to speak, mourning the listener that would never come, wondering what he had done wrong, what was missing, what would finally be enough. She didn't answer him. She answered the person in the coffin. The Night Mother spoke. For the first time in years, for the first time since Alessandre Dupré burned alive in a crypt in Breville. And she spoke not to the man who had tended her, carried her, talked to her, protected her, and kept her present in the world for over a decade. She spoke to the stranger hiding in her own casket. She gave them a contract. She gave them the binding words, the phrase Cicero had carried in his memory for 15 years, preserved without a single day's lapse, waiting for the moment they would have somewhere to land. Darkness rises when silence dies. And before the coffin opened, in the moment before everything changed, she said this about the man who had kept her candles lit and her presence known through years of total darkness. Poor Cicero. Dear Cicero. Such a humble servant. But he will never hear my voice. For he is not the listener. Not cruel, not dismissive. Something that sounds, if you let it, almost like tenderness. The lid opened. Cicero demanded an explanation, and then heard the phrase he had memorized and carried and waited with for 15 years spoken back to him by someone else as proof of what had just happened in the Ichthys. Dark. He danced. He called the stranger by the title he had been searching for across half a continent. The listener. The listener. The listener. He was never rejected. He was trusted with the harder thing. The spirit of Lucien Lachance, an assassin who continues to serve the Brotherhood from beyond the void, carries a specific warning into the mortal world. Sithis does not want Cicero dead. The keeper is sacred. Lachance knew what Cicero did not, that the god of the void had been watching this particular servant the entire time he thought he was alone. The years of isolation, the maintained body, the unbroken incantations, the refusal to abandon a post the rest of the world had already forgotten. All of it seen, all of it held, all of it part of a purpose Cicero was never told he was serving. There was a man on a road north of Whiterun, standing beside a broken wagon in the cold, talking to a stone coffin that would not answer him. The road is behind him now. The wagon is fixed. There is a man in a cold room by candlelight, running an oiled cloth along the arm of a mummified body, talking to the dark the way he always has. Because he was always supposed to be here, doing this, for the person who was always supposed to come. His bells are still. The chamber is quiet. She does not answer him. She never answers him. But tonight, in this same cold room, a stone coffin holds someone else in the dark, and in a few minutes, the silence will end. The keeper keeps, not glory, not the voice. There is a human shape to this that has nothing to do with the Brotherhood or the void. We have all, at some point, tended something that did not answer us, kept faith with something we could not explain to anyone else, stayed at a post that seemed to matter to no one, in a silence we could not justify because leaving felt like a worse betrayal than continuing. Most of us never find out whether it mattered. We just go on. If these stories help you find rest, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It means more than you know, and it keeps the light on. The candles are burning low. The chamber is quiet. Somewhere in the cold stone of a Skyrim hold, a jester in bells is washing a body that cannot speak, talking to the dark in a voice no one can hear, keeping faith with something that will only answer someone else. He is exactly where he is supposed to be.